Hello, I'm Jane and welcome to my glass studio. I get a lot of people asking me how they can start glass making, glass blowing at home. So in this video, I'm going to outline the equipment and materials you'll need in the same way that I started, which was from like bead making. And this is kind of the same for like either just as a hobby or if you're wanting to expand and develop things later on. Also in the beginning, I thought I needed specific equipment and things in order to start, and I actually didn't. So I'm going to let you know from my experience, like what you actually need and what you don't. So let's get started. So the very first thing you're going to need, and I would say this is more important than the torch itself, is eye protection. So these are Didymium Glasses. These are UV and IR protective. And these basically cut out the solar flare as you're working on the torch. You have to have these. These are going to protect your eyes from being damaged over time. They also cut through the orange glow that happens when you're melting the glass, so it's actually easier to see what you're doing. So they're very practical as well. These are great for beadwork and small work. I wear these still today all the time. There are glasses with stronger filters, but don't worry about these just yet. If you're doing beadwork, these are perfect. These are expensive at about £70 a pop. But as long as you look after them, you only have to buy them once, and these are essential. By the way, side note, you cannot use welding glasses. I looked into this because these are a lot cheaper, but they will not protect your eyes. You have to get the Didymium glasses when working with glass. So the next thing you're going to need is a torch. So when it comes to torches, there's a lot of choice. So for beginners, and depending on your budget, there are kind of two options to go with. You can invest in a very cheap hothead torch. This is about maybe £30, which is a basic screw-on torch, very similar to like this one, and it goes onto a little canister like this. This you can then fix onto your workbench with like brackets and things like that. This is the cheapest option to go with if you want to just get started immediately. And this is a great option for someone who's on a very low budget, just wants to get their teeth into it and see if they like it with very non-commitment. Or if you know that it's just going to be like a hobby. I actually used a hothead and one of the cast cans for like a workshop, as it's great for being portable as well. The thing is that this canister for me only lasted about 4 hours. And because I was doing it every day, this wasn't really that great because I was having to buy so many of these. So actually I outgrew it extremely quickly. So the next level up from a hothead torch is actually a multi-fuel torch, which uses oxygen and gas. For this, you would need a propane tank and you would need an oxygen concentrator. So this is quite a jump up from the hothead we were just talking about. So let's talk about the torches first. So I started out with a Nortel minor torch. This is one of the smallest torches out there. It lasted me a good 1.5 years or so while I was getting started making beads. It is extremely easy to use, very beginner friendly, and it actually screws directly into your workbench. There are a lot of different brands out there that you can use. I highly recommend Nortel and Bethlehem burners for beginners, because that's what I started out with. And before you maybe go and buy one of these brand new, I actually highly recommend looking online like eBay. There are often quite a lot of beginner torches actually for sale secondhand, and they're in really good quality, so you may find that you save quite a lot of money. To set up your torch, you are going to need your hoses and things like that to connect to your gas and your oxygen. But typically the torch comes with these bits from the supplier, so that's okay. When you're a beginner, it keeps things a lot more straightforward. If they do not come with the torch, then typically the supplier will sell them separately as well. If you're really struggling, just give them an email. They'll let you know exactly what you need to get. So next, let's talk about propane. So if you have never bought propane in your life, I'm going to give you the absolute basics here. So the propane I personally use is Calogas. This particular tank here is 10 kilograms. And this typically lasts me between 4 to 6 months. It lasts a really long time. So if you're buying gas for the first time, there's actually 2 fees to bear in mind. So the first one is actually the tank hire itself, which the last time I got this one, actually, I think it was about £40 or so. And then after that, you come in for refills. So the first upfront payment I had to pay for the tank hire and the gas was about £80. And then after that, every 4 to 6 months when it was empty, it would then be about £40. They come in various sizes as well. So depending on how much you think you might need, you can go smaller and therefore it will also be cheaper. If you have questions about setting up and all that kind of thing, I will do that in a separate video. So now that we've got our gas, we're going to need our oxygen. So let's talk about oxygen concentrators. So this is what an oxygen concentrator looks like. It's quite small and will fit under any desk. And you plug these into a normal plug socket in the wall. And it's essentially a pump, which is going to pump oxygen into your torch through a hose, like this one. And a lot of these oxycons are actually from medical supplies which have been refurbished for flame working. And the refurbished ones you can get at a discounted price because they are secondhand. And they've also been like refurbished by a lampworking professional, so you know that you're getting the right thing and that it works. And these can come in various sizes as well, which can be a little bit complicated. So pay attention when you're buying a torch as to how much PSI, how much oxygen is required in order to run it. But for a small bead making torch, you will probably only need about a 4 litre or a 5 litre oxycon. If you're struggling at all, go to the supplier, go to the manufacturer, and they'll be able to help you. This is the bit of kit that took me the longest to actually save up for. It did take a few months for me to like work full time and build up the funds in order to get it, and it was secondhand, but I got there in the end, and it still works perfectly today. As long as you look after them, they will last you so long. So the next thing is glass. This is the really fun part. So glass actually has different coefficiencies. There are different types of glass you can buy. I use COE 104 for the first like 3 years or so of my glass experience, and this is definitely like the bead making glass. And this is the glass you want to start out with by far. It's the cheapest, the color variations are fantastic, and this is actually the softest glass temperature wise. So actually you don't need much temperature in order to melt it, so as a beginner it's fantastic. Quite a few of the suppliers out there also actually offer a beginner's pack, so you'll get like a rainbow selection of all these different colors, which you can then experiment with and see which ones you like, and they're typically really cheap as well, so ideal. I think I bought quite a few packs of those when I started. I also in the early days spent a lot of time blending these colors together as well and like rippling them and stuff and just experimenting and having fun. So let's talk about Mandrels, cooling beads and bead release. So these are your mandrels, and this is what you're going to make your beads onto. These are basically just stainless steel thin rods. These are 1.6 millimeter. These are the ones I recommend. So you're working in the flame, and this is the bead that you've created. Now, if you just put the glass directly onto the metal, it would stick and you would never be able to get this bead off. So we dip it in this white clay stuff here, which we call bead release. So you dip all of your mandrels in like this. So bead release typically comes as a powder like this. This is about 200 grams, which you then mix with water into kind of a paste that you keep in a jar like this. I've got a lid that's like a flippy one. You could also use a screw lid, and then that just sits on your desk and it's all ready and shaken up, ready to go. And this stuff really does last forever. I think one bag of this I've had for over a year now. You can buy some of it pre-mixed for you as a liquid solution. There are other dry powders as well that are actually toxic. Others are non-toxic. So just depending on what you wanted to do and your budget, etc. There are different kinds out there. I personally like to get the dry stuff just because then like the shipping cost is a lot cheaper, as you're not paying for the water weight. But I get the non-toxic stuff. Once you have made your bead, you're going to need to put it in these cooling beads here. Once you have finished making your bead, it will basically, if you leave it out in the air like this, it will go into thermal shock and it will crack. By putting it into the cooling beads, it will bring down the temperature nice and slowly, and then therefore your bead is going to be fine. These are also very, very affordable. I think again, this a pack of this cost me about maybe £7, and it lasts me forever. I never have to buy this again as long as I look after it. Also, this tin here is just like an old, like a biscuit tin. This has been perfect, so you don't really have to buy anything for this. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is annealing kilns. So this is the first kiln I ever had. It's like the size of a toaster. This is called a Katiki kiln. It literally just plugs straight into the wall, and I would set it to program. And this is literally the size of the shelf. It's so cute. And while I was working, I would take my bead that I had literally just made and put it straight into the hole like this, and then it would anneal. And this, I think, was my biggest misconception or like misunderstanding when I was starting out, was that I needed to have an annealing kiln in order to even begin. And looking back, it's just not the case. I actually could have got away with just using my cooling beads for the first few months. I could have been practicing making these beads and cooling them and trialing out all these different colors while saving up for one of these. I didn't need these immediately. I could have made all these beads and taken them off, put them to one side, and then annealed them much later on, like months even later, in one of these once I was ready. And this one was secondhand on eBay, and I think this cost me about maybe £150 or something. Brilliant kiln. I love this thing to pieces. I don't even really use it that much anymore, but I keep it for like sentimental value. But But if you are wanting a annealing kiln, basically you're looking for something that has a temp of at least over 600 degrees in order to anneal glass. The annealing temperature I use for my soft glass is 540. And you basically just want the kiln to be able to sit at 540 for however long that you're working for, and then to ramp down slowly. That's degrees Celsius, by the way. If you're wanting to sell your items and stuff, then I highly obviously recommend getting a kiln. If you're just experimenting and doing it for a hobby for a while, you do not need to get these immediately. So next I'm just going to cover a little bit about the small tools and stuff that you can get. So of course you're going to need a lighter of some description in order to light your torch. So you can just use a basic lighter. If you feel uncomfortable getting that close to the nozzle and lighting it, you can use one of these ones. It gives you a much longer range and you don't feel like you're getting right in front of the torch in order to light it. These are quite literally a couple of quid, like they're cheap as chips. The next thing you'll notice probably if you're going around shopping for glass blowing bits is paddles and these brass presses. So this is a Graphite Marver, and this allows you to shape the glass into various teardrops. There are also brass presses like this one. So this is for round shapes, round spheres. You put the glass into here, and then you actually press this one over the top to create the shape. And there are so many different shapes and stuff out there. So depending on what you kind of want to make and what you're interested in, there's something out there for everybody. So lastly, let's talk about ventilation. So when working with glass, you need adequate ventilation. And honestly, depending on the space you're working in will vary on what kind of ventilation you might need. For example, if you're working in, say, a shed or a garage, which has one door at this end and one door at the other, you've got a lovely airflow through there. You may not necessarily need to put anything in. Or if you're working in a space which doesn't allow for a lot of natural airflow, then you'll need to put a ventilation system in. And this is not nearly as scary as it sounds. Quite a few suppliers will actually offer ventilation hoses and hoods for you to buy as a beginner starter pack. I am actually just recently upgrading my ventilation system as we speak, so I'll actually do a setup video on that separately. From what I was taught with ventilation about this is that if you can smell it, then you need ventilation. If there's no smell from the glass, then you're okay. Using adequate ventilation though is extremely important. Glass does give off toxic fumes which will damage your health over time, so it's really important that you're breathing cleaner air and then it's not getting into your lungs. Also, now remember, we're working with fire, so it's really good practice that you have a fire blanket nearby. Mine lives right next to my workbench. I've never actually had to use this, but just knowing that it's there makes me feel a lot more safe and comfortable. I also recommend just a leather apron to put on top of what you're wearing. Sometimes the glass will ping off and it will settle on your clothes or on your jacket, and just it's good protection anyway. I also recommend a little first aid kit and maybe a little first aid like kind of burns kit too. The burns kit is actually a really good one. It's got a lot of cooling gel and things like that in it, so when you do eventually have a little burn, which will happen, you've got the right kit to like look after yourself. I would also really like to highly recommend the Contemporary Lampworking Volume 1 for beginners. If you've watched my TikToks, you know that I'm learning from my skill tree and learning from these books. And this is actually as a set of 3 actually. So there's Volume 1, there's Volume 2, there's Volume 3, which I haven't yet got. It's got great step-by-step tutorials in here, as well as loads of really in-depth information as to how to set things up and equipment, all that kind of stuff. So pretty much everything I know actually comes from this book. And the writer is Bandu Dunham. I will again put the link in the description for this. You may even actually want to buy this before you invest in literally anything else. Give yourself some time to read up on everything and learn about the setup before you actually begin. And these are sold separately or as a set. So hopefully I have now covered everything that you'll need to get started. I will be going in depth into each and every segment of this video. For example, how to actually set up a beginner torch, how to set up your ventilation system. I'll also do a tutorial on how to make your first bead, as well as doing a basic annealing program on a kiln and things like that. This video was more of a kind of checklist of all the things that you'll need to look into in order to start. I will also list a bunch of supplies in the description below with links so you can find all the bits yourself. I hope this was helpful and I will see you again soon.